Once, Barron Trump was quietly enjoying a peaceful day at a local café. It was a typical day for him, trying to blend into the background like any other teenager would in a public space. Despite his famous family name, Barron always seemed to carry himself with a sense of composure, choosing to keep a low profile in most situations. However, that calm would soon be interrupted by an incident that would catch the attention of everyone nearby and teach a valuable lesson to all who witnessed it. As Barron sipped his coffee, lost in his thoughts, a woman at a nearby table seemed to notice him. She had been talking loudly on the phone for quite some time, but now, with her phone down, she stared directly at Barron. Her gaze wasn't the usual polite acknowledgement you might expect from a passerby. No, she was visibly uncomfortable, as though Barron's presence was too much for her. It didn't take long for her irritation to turn into words. "Why do you always have to hide behind your father's name?" the woman said sharply, addressing Barron in a loud enough voice for those around to hear. "You think you're so special just because of who your father is, but you're nothing like him." At first, Barron seemed taken aback. His eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, he looked at her in disbelief, unsure of how to respond to such a confrontation. The cafe had fallen into an eerie silence, with the woman's words hanging heavily in the air. Everyone in the room knew who Barron Trump was, and the tension was palpable. They could see the uncomfortable situation unfolding in front of them, waiting for someone to step in and diffuse the tension. But Barron didn't look for someone to intervene. Instead, he took a deep breath, set down his cup, and stood up from his seat. He was calm, composed, much more so than anyone could have expected from a teenager in his position. He walked toward the woman, and everyone in the cafe braced themselves for what might come next. "What exactly is it that you're trying to say?" Barron asked, his voice steady and measured. There was no sign of anger, no hint of frustration. Instead, there was something almost serene in the way he addressed her. The woman, still fuming, didn't back down. "I'm just saying," she scoffed. "You don't deserve any special treatment just because of who your father is. You need to stop hiding behind your last name and learn to stand on your own." Barron paused for a moment. He looked at the woman with a calm, thoughtful expression, as if he were considering her words. Then, without raising his voice, he simply said, "I don't choose who my family is, just like you don't choose yours. But what I do choose is how I respond to the world." He continued, "It's easy to judge people when you don't understand their lives. I get that. But if you think the best way to make yourself feel better is by tearing someone else down, you might want to rethink your approach." The silence in the cafe grew thicker as Barron's words seemed to sink in. The woman opened her mouth to retort, but something in Barron's calm demeanor seemed to stop her. She realized that the confrontation she had sought wasn't going to play out as she had imagined. Barron wasn't reacting with anger or defensiveness. He wasn't the teenager she had expected to lash out. Instead, he was teaching a lesson without even trying. Barron didn't say anything else. He turned around, walked back to his seat, and picked up his coffee once again. The atmosphere in the cafe slowly returned to normal, but something had shifted. The people who had been watching the encounter were now reflecting on what had just happened. It wasn't the confrontation that stuck with them, but rather the way Barron had handled it. His composure in the face of hostility was not only admirable, but also served as a reminder of the power of taking the high road. By responding to criticism with maturity and restraint, Barron had subtly yet effectively taught everyone present that they didn't have to give in to negativity, that they could choose to remain calm and composed in the face of judgment, that they could rise above the petty attacks of others and respond with dignity. Later on, when the incident made headlines, many people praised Barron for his response. The story quickly became an example of how handling negativity with grace could silence those who tried to bring you down. Barron's words resonated with many, particularly those who had witnessed similar situations in their own lives but had struggled to find a way to respond. It's easy to get caught up in the emotions of a confrontation, to react impulsively, out of anger or hurt. But Barron Trump's response reminded everyone that there's always power in restraint, in taking a step back, assessing the situation and choosing to respond with wisdom rather than emotion. As the days passed, the lesson Barron had inadvertently taught the cafe goers lingered in the minds of many. People saint. The incident at the cafe didn't just end when Barron left the table. In fact, it sparked a wider conversation. People who had witnessed the exchange started discussing it on social media, and news outlets picked up the story, sharing their takeaways. Barron's quiet dignity in the face of criticism became the subject of reflection for many, and his response resonated with people from all walks of life. The story quickly spread across platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, with countless users praising Barron for handling the situation with such grace and maturity. People shared their personal experiences of being unfairly judged or criticized, and found themselves inspired by Barron's calm response. Many said they hoped they could emulate his composure in their own lives, particularly in the face of negativity. 1. Of the key takeaways for most people was Barron's ability to choose his reaction. It wasn't that he was above criticism or that he was immune to feeling hurt or frustrated. Rather, it was that he chose not to let those emotions dictate his behavior. Instead of succumbing to the temptation to retaliate or lash out, Barron took a deep breath, assessed the situation, and responded with wisdom. In the weeks following the cafe encounter, a number of public figures, both celebrities and everyday people, echoed Barron's approach. Some began to share their own stories of how they had been in similar situations and had chosen to take a different approach, often with positive results. They found that when you meet negativity with kindness or silence with respect, it disarms the aggressor and leaves them with nothing more to say. There was also a deeper reflection on the nature of public scrutiny. Barron, like many children of famous figures, had long been under the microscope of public opinion, often without much control over how he was perceived. Many of the online discussions centered around the idea that it wasn't just Barron's actions that were impressive, it was the way he managed to keep his composure despite the constant public spotlight. He had, in that moment, given everyone a lesson in self-awareness and emotional intelligence. As the weeks turned into months, the incident continued to be brought up by people who were seeking advice on how to handle conflicts in their own lives. The story wasn't just about Barron Trump anymore. It had transformed into a broader lesson in emotional resilience and the power of staying grounded in the face of adversity. There were even conversations around how people could benefit from reflecting on Barron's approach when it came to social media or online trolling. In a world where cyberbullying and negative comments were rampant, Barron's ability to rise above the situation without feeding into the drama was seen as a perfect example of how one might navigate the digital age with poise. Over time, Barron's reputation shifted. While he had always been known as a quiet and reserved individual, people began to see him as a figure of maturity, one who had learned early in life the importance of managing his emotions and choosing how to react to the external world. It was clear that, even though he was still a teenager, he had developed a profound sense of self-discipline. In many ways, the incident at the cafe not only affected those who were present, but also became a turning point in the way Barron was seen by the public. No longer was he just the son of Donald Trump. He had become someone who, through a simple yet powerful interaction, taught a valuable life lesson. That how we respond to others says far more about who we are than the words of those who try to bring us down. What had started as a moment of tension in a quiet cafe had evolved into a larger conversation about human behavior, respect, and how to approach difficult situations with maturity. Barron's actions that day stood as a reminder that we can all choose how to respond to negativity, whether it comes from a stranger at a cafe or from the barrage of online criticisms we often face. And so, Barron Trump's response to being yelled at in that cafe continues to resonate with people, not as a story of public conflict, but as a story of quiet strength. The lesson was simple, yet profound. In a world where so many people are quick to speak, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is remain silent, reflect, and respond with dignity. And in doing so, you might just teach others how to do the same. As time passed, Barron's story began to take on a life of its own. It was discussed in various forums, and even professional self-help gurus took to sharing their thoughts on how Barron had handled the situation so calmly. Some experts pointed out that his ability to manage conflict without escalating it was a reflection of emotional intelligence, something that is often overlooked, especially in moments of confrontation. Barron had shown a level of emotional maturity that many adults still struggled to grasp. In a world that constantly feeds on sensationalism, where people are quick to engage in drama and negativity, Barron's response served as a refreshing reminder of the power of restraint. It wasn't about avoiding confrontation, it was about handling it in a way that left everyone, whether they were a critic or a bystander, feeling more enlightened than before. The incident also sparked discussions about the pressures faced by children of public figures. Barron, in particular, had grown up in the public eye, with his every move scrutinized and analyzed. Yet, instead of allowing those pressures to consume him, he seemed to navigate the challenges with a level of grace that many admired. This, in turn, led to deeper conversations about empathy. People began to recognize that Barron, like all children, deserved the space to grow and learn, away from the harsh glare of public judgment. The online discussions surrounding the incident began to shift from focusing on Barron as an individual to a more collective reflection on how society deals with public figures, especially children. There was a call for more compassion and understanding when it came to the way we speak about others, particularly those who have not asked for the public attention they receive. The café incident, in many ways, served as a catalyst for these larger discussions on kindness, humility, and self-awareness. In the months following, Barron himself remained largely out of the spotlight, choosing to continue his life in relative privacy. He didn't seek attention or fame from the event. His ability to stay true to himself, despite the media's efforts to sensationalize every aspect of his life, was in itself a statement. He didn't need to bask in the attention that his response had garnered. He simply wanted to live life, on his own terms, learning, growing, and evolving without the constant pressure of public opinion. But the ripple effect of his actions continued. Schools and educators took note of how Barron had handled the situation, and some even used it as an example in character development lessons. It became a case study for teaching students how to deal with criticism, manage conflict, and rise above negativity. Barron had unknowingly turned a simple cafe exchange into a teachable moment that resonated with all ages. Some psychologists even discussed Barron's response in the context of personal growth. They highlighted that what he demonstrated was a valuable lesson in self-regulation, the ability to control one's emotions and reactions even when faced with challenging circumstances. The fact that Barron could face a confrontation, remain calm, and respond in a way that de-escalated the tension showed a maturity that many would aspire to develop in their own lives. Barron's response wasn't just about defending himself against criticism. It was about setting a tone for how to handle adversity in a world where people are often quick to judge. In a society where people frequently feel the need to retaliate, Barron's example became a guiding principle. You don't need to fight fire with fire. Sometimes the most powerful response is to remain calm, stay grounded, and let your actions speak louder than your words. Years down the line, when people spoke of Barron Trump, they often reflected on that day in the cafe as one of the defining moments of his early years. While many would have expected the situation to unfold into a public spectacle, it was Barron's quiet yet powerful reaction that had made the lasting impression. He had used his voice not through loud words, but through measured, thoughtful responses that communicated volumes about who he was as a person. In a way, the cafe moment became a cornerstone of Barron's character, a reminder to all that integrity, grace, and emotional intelligence are some of the most important qualities a person can possess. It was a lesson that went far beyond the individual involved. It was a lesson for society as a whole about the impact of our words, the power of our reactions, and the importance of choosing kindness over conflict. As Barron continued to grow into adulthood, many remembered that moment not for the controversy surrounding it, but for the way he handled himself. In a world that often glorifies drama and conflict, Barron Trump's lesson on composure, self-control, and humility remains a powerful testament to the idea that the greatest strength sometimes lies in restraint.